Welcome to the Honest Business Podcast. This is the show for ambitious, value-driven business owners who are actively building a business that works for them. Hi, I'm May James, and I'm here to make scaling your business easier and more rewarding than ever. Each week, we will dive into simple, sustainable strategy and pragmatic leadership discussion to support you as you take imperfect action on your entrepreneurial journey. If you want to stay ahead, exceed your growth goals, and have a purposeful, thriving business, then keep on listening. Hello and welcome back to the Honest Business Podcast. I'm May James, your host, and I'm very excited for today's episode. We are going to be talking about, drumroll, how to know when you need to make your next hire, or you need to hire someone in your business, whichever kind of makes sense for you. This is a topic that gets asked a lot, a lot. And good, it's rightfully so, because it is a big topic and it's something that can really transform your business, but can also be done at the wrong time and then be quite catastrophic for your business. Here's what I would kind of suggest to you, and a process I walk people through, and I'm giving it to you in your ears today for free. And we've got quite a few points to go through, so let's go. So, first thing I need you to think about is, you're likely listening to this podcast because maybe you're just intrigued, but maybe you're actually in this situation right now and you're like, I don't know, should we hire someone? Should we not? How do I know that? Who do we hire? That's the other question of like, how do you know who to hire? And you're kind of thinking, I don't know. So, first of all, you need to really look at your capacity and your workload and what's going on in that arena. So, what can we get off your plate? So list out and write down all of the things that you're currently doing, things that take up your time. I do this over a month period and weeklies because there's going to be different tasks you do, and really get clear on all of those. Identify all of those that potentially can go at some point. I'm not saying they're going now, but just like get really clear on, this at some point can go. This, like, do I need to edit my podcast? Probably not. Do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? And get really clear on what needs to go, what doesn't. Then get really clear on what do you like doing and what you don't like doing. And I think colour coding and even highlighting and different things like that can be great, or just keying things, like putting keys on things can be good. Of what do you enjoy doing? What gives you joy? What gives you life? What doesn't? So then the other side of that, what drains you? What's really hard? What do you not like? What isn't in flow for you? When do you know that you're not performing at your optimum best state? Then I would identify which tasks in your kind of ball game are the revenue generating stuff, which is the stuff where like it's really bringing money in, it's bringing cash flow in. Where are you delivering? Maybe you're some kind of service base that you're delivering client work. Where are you kind of doing that stuff? And then where is there just random stuff? Because there's always some like random stuff here, there and everywhere. And that can be really key for us to identify. Then I want you to think about, is your revenue right now stuck at a certain point because of time? Now that is often the first sign that people end up thinking, right, we probably need to hire someone. So it might be that you're fully booked out, and if you manage to hire someone and gave off a load of stuff, that your capacity would open up and you might be able to kind of have more clients maybe. And so if that's a situation for you, then that's a sign of like, right, okay, well maybe it is time to hire someone. That is not always the case though for everyone. So the question is your revenue stuck at the moment? Yes or no? Then, is your revenue stuck because of time, which is kind of what we've just spoke about? Yes or no? Is your revenue stuck because of something else? And let's list out what that thing is and get really clear around that. Your revenue might not be stuck at all, and that's fine, but it's just really important for us to get clear on that. The other thing to look at is, what is your revenue potential? Does your revenue have a cap at the moment because of X, Y, and Z thing? So for some people, it's like, it's got a cap because the people that provide the service is not necessarily you, the CEO, but we haven't got enough people who provide the service to actually then go and get more clients. So if that's the case and that's you, then you need to think about this and be like, right, yeah, okay, the revenue is stuck and it's because of X, Y, and Z thing. That is going to be an indicator that it's going to make sense to hire someone. Now, don't get me wrong. If we're at this point, it kind of means we're a bit late, because we shouldn't be getting to a point where your revenue is stuck, we need to be anticipating and moving before that. But that's a whole separate conversation, a different place to be. Depends where your business is. And, business is hard sometimes, when we're scaling, when we're getting a lot of things going on at once, it's not always possible to do the ideal situation. And I think this is why I'm really open and honest and just real about these situations, because you hear a lot of this is how to do this is how to do that, especially when it comes to scaling a team. But a lot of it is very ideal based. It's very theoretical, it's very theory based, very this is what you should do, but none of it's actually what actually works in practice. So I am very aware that sometimes it's not possible for us to be predicting demand and predicting this, that and the other and hiring in time and all the rest of it. So think about where you are in terms of revenue. Then really figure out from your perspective that's what is causing you stress and what's causing you a bit of a pain and a bit out of that, what do you want to get rid of? So is there anything off your plate you want to get rid of? Is it off someone else's plate? Is there someone else in the organization who is struggling and not actually doing their job because they came into the business when it was really small and they ended up kind of taking on 3 people's worth of role, and therefore you now need to start separating that out? Is that something you need to look at? But really get clear on who needs to get rid of something, because the ultimate thing is that when you are bringing someone into a business to hire them, it does ultimately come down to this idea of somebody is getting less of a workload than they currently have, or you're opening up space for more capacity to make more money. Sometimes it's both, sometimes it's either or, but it's always one or the other to some degree, right? It's always that element of, this makes sense of, it's one in, it's one out, it's some kind of making someone's life easier somewhere down the line, allowing someone to go and do their job more deeply and more thoroughly versus just doing the job for the sake of doing the job. That kind of vibe is something you need to work out. You need to work out what makes sense from a business-wide perspective. So sometimes, and this is a real trap people get into, especially as you scale, you're going to start making decisions based on departmental areas. So a lot of people will then be right, well, we need a marketing person, so what makes sense in the marketing specifics? But where that goes wrong is that we're not taking into account whole departments and whole other departments for them to come in as an organisation, as an overall strategy. So you really need to think about what makes sense business-wide, especially, when you're a business that is not a massive corporate. Everything has to make sense for each other because everyone's thing impacts each other, right? So it's you might feel right, we need someone else in marketing, but if you've already got someone who helps you with marketing and you're going to get someone else, great. But what is the output of their job and what does that mean for them? If that means that the purpose and the success path for their KPIs would be more leads in, or it would be a better brand awareness, what you've got to understand is, does that make sense for the goals of the overall business? Have you got capacity to serve more customers? If the salespeople are hey, and when I say people, it can be one person, it might be you, it might be 3 people, whatever, it could be an agency. If they're sat there thinking, well, hang on a minute, that doesn't work because the capacity is the same, then you need to go back and readjust. And this is why I think you've got to really take a backwards, zoom out step. And this is why, I help a lot of people with this, because it's quite complex sometimes of really working out what does make sense and who does need help, because everything's a knock-on effect to another and it's a business cycle and a business loop, right? And all of the departments are connected. So thinking about what makes sense business-wide is going to really help you. The other thing to think about is look at your 6-month, your 12-month, and your 24-month goals. Where are you going as a business? What's the vision? What is the kind of output that you want to create? What are your goals? What are your targets? Then make plans based around that and also the factual data you have. If you can make your hiring decisions around data, that's going to really help. Data-driven decision-making, so key. I know I talk about it a lot. But you need to collate all your data together that you have to support the case of why you're going to bring someone else in. And then also create and select and, refine the data around why you shouldn't. Because there'll be data on both sides, because there always is, right? It's small business world. There'll be data that tells us everything and anything. I'm not saying that the data is always right. I'm not always saying the data is valid or reliable. But what I'm saying is that using data to some degree will really help support your decision making and make it easier for you. So look at your goals and think, right, well, in 6 months' time, we want to do this project. If that's a project that's a marketing project, then bringing the marketing person on might make a hell of a lot of sense. But if the vision for the 6 months is that you're going to do this big operational shift and that you need some more hands and manpower there, then it's like, if it's an either or, which makes more sense? You have to really look at what is the goal and what is the desired goal in the longer term as well. And then work backwards from there and really think about what does that mean for you. The other thing, obviously, is finances and budgeting. So that needs to come from you having a clear understanding of your finances, a clear understanding of how much money are you making? Are you making profit? Are you not? Are you making a loss? Are you struggling to collect invoices? Are you finding that people are not paying? Are you got issues with that? Like, really make sure you understand your numbers of where your business is at. I'd also say, which is a one that people don't talk about, is understand where your tax is for the year, wherever you are in the financial year, in relation to your tax returns and VAT returns and whatever else you're doing. Just make sure you have a grasp on how much money is in the business, how much of that is supposed to be going on tax, how much of it is supposed to be going elsewhere, how much is your personal money, all of this stuff, and have conversations with the people that support you around that with finance, whether you've got an FD, a virtual FD, whether you've got an accountant, a bookkeeper, whoever you kind of help, a financial advisor, whatever. Make sure you have clear conversations and say to them, right, this is what I'm planning on doing. Does this make sense? Because just because there's a number in a bank account doesn't necessarily mean that is the number that's actually the money, if that makes sense. Like, it can quickly transpire that it's not. The other thing to think about is, how do you want to approach this hire? Do you want to do it so that their salary for 6 months is already in the bank? Do you want to do it that it's already in there for a month? How much is their salary dictated upon them actually providing results versus what you've actually got the capacity paying for now? And this is not an episode, it's too nuanced for me to be able to tell you what you should do because it depends on your personal situation and ethics and morals and all the rest of it. But you really need to have a think about, right, yeah, finances in this position. This is our contracted revenue for the next 6 to 12 months. Look at what your contracts have signed and how much revenue is there as a reoccurring income. And then go from there and be really clear on what is it that you're going to pay them. Now, this isn't an episode around designing a job description, designing a role, blah, blah, blah. But what I am going to say is make sure that the money you pay them has room to grow. I think that's really important. Like, don't pay them too much out the gate if you have a vision for them to stay with you for a long time. That's not me saying don't pay them well. That's not me saying exploit them or anything like that. I'm just saying be really careful with what you set your amount as, because that is going to dictate a hell of a lot going forward. That's all I'm going to say on that kind of thing, because I feel like we can do a different episode on designing and finding and, the best practices and stuff. So, next thing is you need to decide, do you want to bring someone in who's a revenue generating person or not? So there's different people in your business, right? Whether that's at the minute it's just you, or whether you have like 3, 5, 10, 20, 30 people. Some of the people in your business are doers and are, there's so many different words we could call them, but providers and different things. And then there's other people who are like revenue generating employees or people or team members or whatever you want to call them. And you need to decide, what does the business need at that point? So just for an example, so I'm clear, someone like an operations person in your business, a doer. I love calling people doers, like in a good way. It's like a good thing, right? Like people who can help you, like a tech person, something like that. They are not really revenue generating. Obviously, we can argue that every role in a business is revenue generating because it's all linked together and it all helps and people can save you money and blah, blah, blah. But like, let's just get clear on those roles that I've just described. In my mind, are not revenue generating. They are things that have to happen to make the business run and to make it smooth, and they make the client experience better, and they make this, that, and the other, and all the rest of it really great. And they are so important, right? So you need a mixture of both. So you need to think about, what does the business need? Does it need something like that to actually get shit done, make stuff happen, and move? Or do you need a revenue generating person? Now, most people are going to instantly think about sales, which is great because sales is a type of thing where it's revenue generating, right? So someone's coming in with the intention to purposely help make more sales in the business and help you progress. There are other roles in a business that would be classed as revenue generating, but for now, let's just think about it as, right, sales. Do you want someone in sales? Because for some people, it's like you need to hire maybe 3 people at once. And so it's a way up of like, well, which one do we hire? Now, when it comes to that, you've then got to think about longer term and matching up money and matching up impact and who can do what without the other person. So sometimes what happens is it makes more sense to get a revenue generating person in order to then fund the other 2 people. That is not always the best case. I'm not saying that as a blueprint. I'm literally just saying it as that is an example. And so you need to decide, what do you want? And there's 2 camps with that. You know, if you don't have anyone who supports you at the moment, there's really is 2 big camps. Some people will argue like the best thing you can do from the start is to get someone who is a salesperson for you to help bring in revenue, which I can't disagree with because, you know, at the end of the day, you got to make revenue, you got to get money in, that sort of thing. However, there is a huge camp of people who also believe that the best thing you should do is get someone who can help you as from a doing perspective. So if you're a visionary and if you're someone who is a CEO, you maybe deliver a lot of the work, you're really like at the forefront of everything, you might need someone behind the scenes who can help you actually implement all the things that you are doing and, you know, changing and actually making stuff happen on the back end. And so that can be an argument of like hire, you know, a VA, an OBM, an operations person, like something like that is also an option. I am not going to tell you which I think that you should get and which is better because it depends on your business and what you're doing and your goals and all the rest of it. That's the kind of space where we have a discussion based upon the 2 of us, you know, working together and understanding what your business is. But it's just for you to think about what makes the most sense for you. Now, next thing, if you know that you need someone to help you, you do not have to immediately think you've got to employ them. And I think this is something that's really important to talk about. So you've got a couple of different options, and this is really going to dictate how your business is, how it exists, what your industry, what your sector is, what the legalities are, blah, 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 blah. But don't automatically think, right, I need some help, so I've got to employ them. You really don't. So you can get contractors, you know, a freelance team member, you can get a part-time employee, a full-time employee, or you can use agency style support. And this is where I think it's really important to get clear on what you want and how you want to build your business and how you want to build your culture. There's nothing wrong with having a mixture of all of them. And some businesses, especially in 2022, are using, you know, sometimes all 3. They're using some freelancers, they use an employed team, and then they've also got an agency and they've got other people as well supporting them. None of them are like better than the other. I don't argue in the sense of like they all have their pros and cons. Depending on your business is where I would suggest certain things. And, you know, for certain clients, I say, right, let's go and build a freelance team. For certain things, I'm like, yep, you need 2. Some people I'm like, you can only employ because of X, Y, and Z reason. It just depends on where you're at. But this point is more so to just say to you that don't discount this idea that you can use people and pay them, and, you know, you can pay them who are self-employed and they want to invest into your business. And I think there's a lot of worry about freelance, right? So, you know, this idea that can you build a freelance team and will people be interested in what you're doing? You can do that. It takes some work in the sense of finding them. It takes some work in terms of onboarding. It takes some work in establishing, you know, boundaries and how you work and all this other stuff. But yes, they can. It's not a like second best choice. I think it used to be like, oh, I don't know if I want to get a freelancer or, you know, someone who is a contractor because they're not going to really care. Like, that's just not the case anymore. And you can find some of the most amazing people. In fact, some of the best talent and the best people are going to be your freelance contractors, because they don't want to work for an agency, they don't want their own agency, and they don't want to be employed. So, like, you really need to shift your mindset around, once you know you need to hire someone, what that is going to be and who that's going to look like and what form that's going to take to really kind of thrive in that arena. But just think about, there is some options there of what you fancy doing and what would make the most sense. Obviously, you know, agency can be a great route as well for some people. It's not normally my like number one, but it all depends on what you're doing and what your goals are and where you're at, etc., etc. Then what you've got to get really clear on is, what does success look like once you get this person in? Because sometimes we can work out, I think we do need to hire someone, but then we can't see what the success would look like. And then we end up with these people who are sunken costs that we end up at just costs that constantly go out every month, but we're not actually seeing that much difference from them. Now, this is not necessarily their fault. It's not that they're a bad person. It's not that they can't even do their job. It's just sometimes in the business, different businesses and different setups and different environments will mean that you'll get more out of certain people at certain times depending on where you're at and what your setup is. So you really need to understand of like, okay, well, if we do bring this person on, what is the actual effect of that and how quickly can we expect that to happen? You've got to set realistic expectations, but you've also got to think about, can the person do their job? Do you have the infrastructure? It's like, sometimes I see funny things where people are going to hire like some bizarre complex role, but then like it doesn't make sense because the other things in the business aren't set up to like support that and to allow them to fully do it, and therefore you're going to pay a premium for a certain type of role, but then you don't need to because you can't do X, Y, and Z thing. So again, it's really about looking a few steps ahead and really grasping onto what will success look like for them right now in the same circumstances that we're in right now. Very easy for everyone to think about, well, this will happen and that'll happen and this will all go well and blah, blah, blah. Most of the time it doesn't. Most of the time it's going to twist and turn and change you, and really you're going to have to tweak and pivot. And so what's important for you is to see that what does success look like for the exact set of circumstances that we are facing right now, today, in this conversation. If we plonk them in there today, what does that look like? Because presumably everything else will get better. Everything else will move on, and that's exciting. But right now, you need to get clear on what does it mean for you in this moment. Number 10. Actually, before we go back to that, the other side of that is you've also got to get clear on what happens if something changes in your business. So you don't paralyze yourself with it and don't get yourself in a fluster about it, because otherwise you'll never hire anyone and it'll, no one would ever do anything. But you do need to think about what happens if you lose this massive client, or this person goes, or this thing happens. Just have a think about it in your head and have an understanding of, right, okay, yeah, that would mean this and that would mean that, and financially that was going to mean this. Just so you're prepared. Now, there's definitely a piece of work to be done around planning and forecasting and preparing and, emergency planning and all sorts of stuff that I do with people. And if this conversation is speaking to you, then let's have a conversation, because there is a piece of work to be done there around that. But you don't have to, don't stress yourself about it in the sense of, obviously, if you lost all your clients, then it's never going to seem like a good idea to hire this person. So you've got to be realistic in what you're kind of proposing yourself to do. The next point, and it kind of relates to what I've just said, is you have to learn to try to predict when you're going to need staff. Now, I know this is not the easiest thing, especially as a small business. If you're growing fast, if you're scaling, if there's a lot going on, the last thing you're going to come around to doing is thinking, right, well, let's just think I'm going to need in the 20th of June in 2023, this person's going to join the business. It's really hard to actually fully know. But you do need to spend time thinking about, as you grow and as you're planning, what does that look like? And how do you plan ahead? Are you using profits from a year previous? How are you going to fund things? Where is the changes going to come in? Where does there need to be a price increase? All of this stuff has to be thought about. And this is why, the work I do with people around strategy and done for you strategy, CEO strategy days, all sorts of different stuff that we do in the business is all to help people get this sorted, because there are so many factors and it can get very confusing and it can feel not lost, but you can feel a bit confused because it does get very heavy, especially if you've come into business and you're a creative, or you're someone who is didn't get into business to be a business owner. You came into business to do whatever your craft is maybe and whatever you love to do and are passionate about. And so then dealing with numbers and this and staffing and all this can feel a lot, right? So that is why I think you need to try and understand, right, next year the revenue goal is this and this is where we're going to do it. And then we need to also put in place when we're going to bring staff in and at what point. And at what point, if we want to bring them in then, when do we need to start recruiting for? All that sort of stuff is stuff that I can help you with and I can help you do. So reach out if that's something you want to discuss, and there's different avenues that we can do that piece of work together in. But it is something that you have to get sorted, because otherwise, and this is what some of you might be in, is you might be in this feast and famine of hiring. You might feel like you're constantly hiring and not really getting anywhere, or you're hiring and you get some really good people, but it's really draining, it's really long, and it also means that there's these big periods of time where it's you either doing loads of stuff that you shouldn't be doing as a CEO, as a director, as a leader, or your team's really suffering and they're getting to the point where they're getting really pissed off and at the end of their tether because, they're really maxed out at capacity. Neither of those is good. Neither of them is going to help the business. Neither of them is going to allow you to be optimized at where you need to be. And both really can have negative, damaging long-term effects. So when it comes to that, really, really you need to think about, where does this strategy piece of work come into this? And some of you will already have some. So you might already have some and you want some support with refining it, with tweaking it, with getting clear on it, with reviewing it and auditing it. And that's something we can also do together. So that is the episode for today. I hope you have found this episode helpful. Please leave us a review and I'll speak to you next week. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Honest Business Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure that you are subscribed. And if you'd like to support the podcast, please share it with others and leave a rating and review. To catch up with all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram @may.james_, where I share the raw, uncut, behind the scenes reality of what running multiple businesses every day truly looks like. As always, links and any resources that were mentioned in the episode will be in the show notes below. That's all for this episode, and I look forward to seeing you next time.